Are you looking for an internet talk radio station for your podcast? Look no further. At the helm of Passionate World Talk Radio are two women that want to provide a spot for you and your podcast to be heard. There are many other places for your podcast, but PWTR has the audience. You will not be disappointed. Our station has been on the internet for the past 16 years. Call us for more information. 484-364-1032 or text Jeannie White, station manager at PHECONNECTSHOW@gmail.com for podcast show details. Welcome to Passionate World Talk Radio. Educate, enlighten, entertain.
Hello, everyone. This is Betsy Wurzel, your host of Chatting with Betsy on Passionate World Talk Radio Network, where we educate, enlighten, and entertain. The views of the guests may not represent those of the host or the station. Folks, you're going to want to listen to this podcast. I am so excited to have with me today Dan Glickman, who is a former vice president of the Aspen Institute, a senior fellow at the Bipartisan Policy Center, and a board member of the World Food Program USA. Dan served for 18 years in the U.S. House of Representatives, representing the 4th Congressional District of Kansas. He was the first U.S. Secretary of Agriculture from 1995 to 2001 and was chairman of the Motion Picture Association of American Corporation from 2004 to 2010, and is also the author of Laughing at Myself, which we're going to talk about, My Education in Congress, on the Farm, and at the Movies. Welcome, Dan Glickman, to Chatting with Betsy.
Thanks. Thanks, Betsy.
You're welcome. Wow, you are a busy man. Very colorful career you had.
Well, I had colorful parents, and they passed the gene on to me, and I've kept it going.
I have to ask you what I ask every author, Dan, is what would you like the reader to take away from your book, Laughing at Myself? I love the title, by the way.
Well, first of all, they got to buy it, so hopefully they'll buy it, so they'll take something away. But I'd say 2 or 3 things. Number one is I spent many years in politics, and politics is still a noble profession, but it's become so toxic and so mean. So the first thing in my book is lighten up, show a sense of humor,
yes.
Smile. You know, the great political leaders, or at least the memorable ones in American history, have been those with a great sense of humor and could tell a joke and could make fun of themselves. And so, you know, I talk about that as a key thing that's missing in today's political life that I'd like to see come back. And I weave that through anecdotes of my own life. So that would be the first thing. The second thing is don't burn bridges, build walls. We had a former president, nameless, but is the previous president, who built bridges wherever he went. And it's not healthy. And you can only get things done if you reach across the aisle. And if you build a wall between you and somebody else who happens to be in another political party, you won't get anything done. So those are kind of the 2 things I talk about. And again, I weave it through my own life experiences.
I agree with you, Dan. I think people are taking themselves way too seriously. People are ultra-sensitive. There's a cancel culture, so you have to be careful what you say. And I think people need to have humor. I know humor has helped me to get through my life. So I think we need to be able to smile and laugh at ourselves. Do you think politicians now take themselves like way too seriously?
Well, I don't know. I can't speak for everybody because there are still some who have a good sense of humor. But you are right. We're in a period of time where there's a great fear that if you say something that's slightly out of place, that you'll get slammed and removed from office. And so it's created kind of a risk-averse atmosphere and I'm not saying to do things that are so politically incorrect that are wrong or racist or evil. I'm not talking about anything like that. I'm just talking about not being afraid to let your guard down a little bit at times. And, the problem we have now is that when you do that, if you do it online or in a place where social media can take advantage of it, there's a record for the rest of your life. And so a lot of people have become very afraid of kind of being themselves. And I think that's too bad.
Right, because now, of course, you have all the social media and cameras on, so you could be recorded and taped and not even know about it. So it must be extra difficult, I would think, for a politician to, watch what they're saying because of the cameras on all the time and the way social media is.
Yeah, and of course, there's not much we can do about that because we're not going to stop social media. But people. The other thing I find is that in politics today, sometimes the goal is not necessarily to serve people or to get things done, but is to stay in power. And both political parties are guilty of this, and not just at the national level, but at the state and sometimes at the local level. And I'm somebody who was in politics, but lost my last race for Congress when I was there. And for about 3 days, I wondered what would happen to me and would I ever have anything to do with the rest of my life. But ultimately, I found out that there is life after politics, and that, if you're resilient, you can do a lot of things, that you don't have to be in politics for your entire life. There are other things to do in life. So that's something that I think in today's current political environment, people don't appreciate.
Yes, there is life after politics, or, when someone retires from their job, even as people are living longer, you can pick up a second career, even a third career.
Right.
I have to ask you, Dan, since you grew up in Kansas, did you face anti-Semitism out in Kansas?
Very little that was actually harmful to me. Look, I mean, I was aware at times, especially when I was in Congress, there would sometimes be comments made by constituents, but it was rare. And when I was Secretary of Agriculture, there historically have not been a lot of Jews involved in farming. And part of that has to do with the fact that Jews couldn't own land in the old country, so they went into commercial operations. But I found people were good, and once people got to know me, they actually kind of liked me. And I've often felt like I was an emissary for the Jewish people, that, especially out in farm country and in rural America, small towns where there weren't a lot of Jewish people living, that I could go out there and they could see me as a normal human being. And so, yeah, I on occasion I would meet that threat, but I was usually able to overcome it.
I think it's interesting because you would think out in Kansas for some reason you would face more of it. I grew up in New Jersey, and I had anti-Semitism. My mom was from the Bronx. She didn't have anti-Semitism until she came to New Jersey. My dad grew up in New Jersey, and he faced anti-Semitism. So I guess it's, the people in your neighborhood will depend on that. How did you get into politics?
Well, as I mentioned, my parents they had this they had a gene that was kind of geared towards being outgoing and entertaining and open and fun to be with. And so they weren't necessarily terribly politically involved, but they endorsed some candidates. They were kind of moderate politicians. We were actually Republicans back then, but it was a different kind of Republicanism. It was more of the, Bob Dole, Dwight Eisenhower type of Republicanism. And but I was in politics, and even in high school, I was, and in college, I was involved in more campus type politics. But I think it was the Vietnam War probably that got me more agitated and interested in getting involved in elective politics. And I was a student at the University of Michigan, which during the 1960s was a hotbed of activism, and it was infectious, and I think it caught me.
Your parents must have been very proud of you getting into politics.
Yeah, my mother and dad were extremely and unconditionally supportive of anything my brother or sister or I did. But in politics, I could call my parents up at 3 in the morning and say, I've got a parade tomorrow. I can't be there. You need to be in the parade. They had a convertible. So, you put the little bumpers, the things on the side that says Dan Glickman's parents. And, I could send them out in the middle of the night at the bat of the hat, and they'd go out and they'd campaign for me. And actually, they were more popular than I was. So a supportive family can have a very positive role in politics.
Oh, yes. I agree. And I have to ask, how did you get into the agricultural side of politics, being the secretary of agriculture?
Well, when I was in Congress, when I first got to Congress, I wasn't expected to win that seat, and so they put me on the agriculture committee because, they didn't think probably, they being the powers that be, the leadership and the party back then, they thought, well, maybe Glickman won't get reelected, so we won't put him on the Appropriations Committee or the Foreign Affairs Committee. We'll put him on the Agriculture Committee. It'll help him politically at home, but I didn't know much about farming or agriculture because my dad was in the scrap iron business. So, but I made it. Early on, I made the political judgment that being involved in agriculture and farm issues was important to my district, in my state, and also was good for me politically in terms of establishing my roots. And so then when after I left Congress and there was an opening for the U.S. Secretary of Agriculture, and Bill Clinton decided that because of my previous involvement in Congress that I would be a good choice. And so he appointed me with the help of Senate Majority Leader Bob Dole, who's a Republican, and of course I'm a Democrat, so was Clinton, but we were able to get this through on a bipartisan basis. So, but my early interest in agriculture bore fruit, certainly, to use the analogy, food analogy, bore fruit when there was an opening for Secretary of Agriculture.
That's incredible. So back then, Democrats and Republicans, would you say, worked better together? More cooperation amongst the parties?
There was always political friction. That's been true since the beginning of time. But I'd say the parties and the different sides worked better, worked more collaboratively. It wasn't as toxic, the atmosphere, as it is now. There were a lot of reasons for that. A lot of it has to do with the nature of 24-hour media today and social media, the amount of money that's spent in politics, which dwarfs what I had to spend. 50 times more than what people had to spend 40 and 50 years ago. And so there are a lot of reasons for that. But today it's much more complicated to get things done and to work across the aisle than it was when I was in the system a long time ago.
Yes, I can imagine that. You tell a funny story in your book, and I'm trying to remember if I get this right because it's been a while since I read it. You were at a luncheon, and was it for the people who had pigs? It was, and they were having pork.
Pork
yes.
Producers, yes.
Yes, and they gave you a steak.
No.
Or they were wondering what you would eat.
No. What happens is I was at the Iowa Pork Producers Luncheon, and so I was Secretary of Agriculture, so that's logical. And the Iowa State Fair it was at the State Fair of Iowa, where it's one of the biggest state fairs in the country. And so they served me a big, giant pork chop, and I must admit I'm no expert on pork chops, but it was at least 3 inches thick. Okay, it looked good, and I can't tell you that I have kept kosher all my life, which is not true, but I did my best not to eat pork when I was out in the public because I thought people need to know that I was Jewish and I didn't eat pork. So they served me this pork chop, and the waiters very kindly came up to me, and he worked at the Pork Producers. He said, "Mr. Glickman, I know that you're Jewish and you probably don't eat pork, so we're going to serve you a steak instead," which I thought was very gracious. And so they took the pork chop away, and they brought me a steak. And then about 3 minutes later, somebody takes the steak away from my plate and puts a pork chop back on my plate because he said, "He's at the Iowa Pork Producers." So this happened a couple of times, and I'm starting to sweat, thinking, oh, my God, my anxiety level was up. And I heard behind me one guy tell the other guy, "I told you he doesn't eat pork." Now, mind you, there are 1,000 people at this luncheon. And so finally I said, no, don't worry about it. Just no worry about it. Don't make a deal. So they finally gave me the steak, and I ate the steak, which, by the way, was very much appreciated by the Iowa Cattlemen's Association, which was meeting right next door. So I was now in the middle of a big brouhaha between the pork producers and the cattlemen, and they could see that I was taking the cattleman's side, so to speak. And so it was kind of a funny anecdote. It worked out. Everybody ended up happy. No problem.
Yeah, I thought it was fun. I couldn't remember exactly because I read a long time ago, and I thought I got to bring that up because I thought that was hysterical when I was reading it. So how did you get from politics into being with the Motion Picture Board Association?
Well, it's funny. When I was in Congress, I served on the House Judiciary Committee, and one of the areas that I focused on was the whole issue of film piracy and intellectual property protection, which, of course, is very important in the entertainment world, whether it's music or movies or wherever. So fast forward, when I left the Department of Agriculture and was doing some other things, and that position opened up, the head of the Motion Picture Association, the fellow who ran it at the time, his name was Jack Valenti. You may recall the name. He was the head of the Motion Picture Association for 35 years, and he was a legend in the movie industry. He liked me because he had worked with me in Congress when I worked on film piracy and intellectual property issues. So he suggested that I be his successor. And the studio executives in Hollywood who ran the association went along with that. So that's how I got the job.
And how did you like doing that?
There were good parts and bad parts. Well, there's plenty of politics in being a chief lobbyist for Hollywood, which is what it was. Different kind of politics. It wasn't Republican and Democrats. It was Disney versus Paramount, and it was Fox versus Warner Brothers, and it was a lot of high drama that would take place. You would expect that in the entertainment business. And so while my job was to be pretty much more the lobbyist for Hollywood, it was like herding cats to bring all these studios together on a variety of issues. So frankly, there was a lot more stress in that job than there even was in politics. And what I mean, traditional politics. On the other hand, it was fun. It's fun being out in California, fun going to film festivals, whether it's Cannes Film Festival or Sundance or whatever it is. So I liked it, and I have a son who was in the movie business. My son John was the president of MGM, the film studio, for the last 10 years. And now he's gone off on his own and opened his own production company called Glickmania Production. So movies are kind of in the blood.
Wow, that's awesome. My son loves going to the movies. He's a movie addict, and I have found over the years, because I did grow up in the 60s, that, and I'm sure you know this because you were on the Motion Picture Board, that they're getting more, I'd say PG-13 is getting more risque than it used to be.
Well, I would say that I think you're probably seeing more violence in movies, but I'm not sure that. I mean, look, our culture has changed, so our movies reflect the culture, and so we're a lot more open. We talk about sex more often. There are things today. For example, a movie today that might be R might have been X 30 years ago, or NC-17. Right. Some of that is change that's occurred in our cultural change, which has much been more openness. But on some things, for example, one of the things I did was run the movie rating system, R, PG-13, and and all GPG and all those things. And on some issues like drug use, cigarette use, we're a lot more conservative today than we were 30 or 40 years ago. So, but with sex and violence, we're probably more liberal because the culture of the society has become more liberal. Yes,
that's true. I have a funny story. I went with my dad and my sister to see the Green Berets back in, it probably was 67 or 68. And the ticket person said, they're too young to go. My father goes, that's okay. They've heard, worse language. but back then it was very
Right.
strict. And that's a memory I have of my dad. My dad would have been so thrilled that I'm talking to a politician. And I think your book is great, Dan, and I hope people buy it. It has humor in it. It is it's entertaining. I could see you in the entertainment industry.
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, I find that you win more battles with lemonade than you do with lemons, and that by and large, having a positive, optimistic outlook is important, and being willing to laugh at yourself is a key part of winning and influencing other people in whatever you do, whether it's politics or business or the nonprofit world or whatever else you do. So I try to get those principles out in my book, if nothing else, it's a fun read. Yes,
it is. I am definitely into humor. I was a caregiver for my husband, and let me tell you, I had to develop a very strange, dark sense of humor to get me through, and it helped. Yeah, no, it does help. Sure. Well, listen, it's been a pleasure talking to you. So yes, it's nice talking to you, Dan Glickman. Folks, read the book. Where can I get it, Dan? Well, it's Laughing at Myself, My Education in Congress, at the Farm, and in the Movies, and it is available on Amazon. And it's also available at some local bookstores. And the place that would have the easiest place would be at the University of Kansas Press, which was my publisher. It's kupress.edu if people want to try there. But it is available on Amazon as well. Oh, okay. And if they want to go to their local bookstore, they could always order it. They can order it, and then you can support your local bookstore, which is so important anyway. Yes, well, thank you, Dan Glickman. It was nice speaking to you. Thank you for coming on. I appreciate it. You're welcome. Okay, bye. Thanks. Bye. Okay, bye-bye. Folks, if you missed any of this podcast, you can catch it all over again on your favorite podcast outlet, Spotify, Spreaker, CastBox, to name just a few. I want to thank Jeannie White, station manager, Passion World Talk Radio Network, for producing the show and writing the blog. There will be information in there on how you can purchase the book. And I want to thank Lillian Caldwell, CEO of Passion World Talk Radio Network, that makes this all possible. And I want to thank you, the listeners. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing this podcast. Appreciate you telling others about Chatting with Betsy. It is free to subscribe. I have wonderful guests on to help you for resources and to share stories that will help you. I want to wish everyone a happy holiday. And if it can't be happy, then I hope you have a peaceful one. In a world where you could be anything, please be kind. This is Betsy Wurzel, your host of Chatting with Betsy on Passionate World Talk Radio Network. Bye-bye now.
Are you looking for an internet talk radio station for your podcast? Look no further. At the helm of Passionate World Talk Radio are two women that want to provide a spot for you and your podcast to be heard. There are many other places for your podcast, but PWTR has the audience. You will not be disappointed. Our station has been on the internet for the past 16 years. Call us for more information. 484-364-1032 or text Jeannie White, station manager, at PHECONNECTSHOW@gmail.com for podcast show details. Thank you for listening to Passionate World Talk Radio. You can listen to this program all over again by going over to https://passionateworldtalkradio.com. You can also hear it on Spotify, Spreaker, Amazon Alexa, AMFM247.com every Tuesday evening between 8 and 9 p.m. YouTube, Facebook, Facebook Live, LinkedIn, and all the other podcast directories one can find on the Internet.